Hey guys, what's going on? Now, about a year ago, I compiled a collection of collaborations that I have done with fellow YouTubers because I've done damn near 30 of them by now. So, I know a lot of people have probably not seen a lot of the collaborations that I've done just because they're on other channels and probably don't even know about them, so I figured it'd be a fun way to, show off what I've done with other channels, not to mention shout out the other channels that hosted the collaborations. So here is volume 2. Now, my buddy Rewind Mike came up with a great idea a couple years ago where he wanted to cover several Vic Tokai games, seeing as they're one of the more underrated developers in retro video games, and he thought it would be a great idea to bring along some of his YouTube buddies to help him out with it, so naturally I picked one of my favorites. Let's see what it is.
If the ingenious title doesn't say it all, Troubleshooter is obviously, well, a shooter. Originally titled Battle Mania in Japan, Troubleshooter stars two teenage hotties armed with guns. Sounds like a great game already, doesn't it? Madison and Crystal are teenage mercenary badasses hired to rescue Prince Abu or some shit, and are equipped with an arsenal to decimate an entire army. And that's what it's going to take for these adolescent heroines to blast their way through a futuristic setting saturated with baddies in what looks like a manga/anime come to life. Madison and Crystal are BFFs and are practically joined at the hip. You control Blondie Madison, while Crystal mirrors Madison's every move. While Madison can only fire to the right, Crystal has the ability to turn around and, while ass to ass with her bestie, attack from behind. Enemies approach from all sides, so firing from both ends is essential in earning that sweet, sweet merc cash. While Crystal is impervious to damage, Madison is not, and getting the two confused while trying to evade enemy fire unfortunately becomes commonplace and is a nuance that you'll have to adapt to. But it's by far a deal breaker. At the beginning of each stage, you have the choice of selecting from 4 different special weapons. These weapons can be used as long as the charge meter is full, which automatically replenishes itself over time after every use. Several regular weapons can also be obtained and powered up to make a trauma-plagued teenage life seem a bit less catastrophic. You only have 1 life, and each hit of damage will reduce your energy by 1 unit. Each unit is basically a life. The music is fast-paced with some killer percussion and even some strange Akira-like tunes that totally complements the insanity that Troubleshooter throws in your face. It also shares the same fanfare from another Vic Tokai classic, Decap Attack. The aesthetics are also attractive and tosses in some goofiness for good measure. The game is fairly short with only 6 stages, but this shooter will without a doubt test your skills, as this one is no walk in the park. It's really no surprise that Troubleshooter didn't do that well here in the States. Like many titles before it, Troubleshooter fell victim to Americanized artwork, which more or less resembles the cover art to some cheesy 60s sci-fi show. Judging from the artwork, I wouldn't want this game on the shelf touching my other Genesis titles either, but in reality, the game is outstanding and a must-play for fans of the genre. Troubleshooter will undoubtedly erect the ephebophile that would otherwise lie dormant in any male middle-aged gamer.
Now, my buddy Will, aka Max Impact 24, had the idea to round up some of his buddies to talk about the worst games that they grew up with. I had a hard time, and I had to reach for this one because I really didn't grow up with bad games. I always had good games, but I did remember one, so let's see what it is.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Sega's 16-bit console was released when I was in middle school, and even as a youngster I began to reject Nintendo's cutesy image. Like my music, I wanted some hard shit. Growing up with ultra-violent movies such as RoboCop and basically anything that Arnie had done,
Stick around.
I was already becoming desensitized to violence. It's all make-believe after all, and needed some blood and gore in my games. This is the sole reason that I had purchased Sword of Sodan. And boy, is this game bad. Originally an Amiga game, Electronic Arts in their early years often ported PC games to the Genesis, and the results were often piss poor. These clunky PC games for the most part did not translate well to home consoles. Sword of Sodan was no exception. Your fighters are marred by extremely slow movement, as if they're sporting Uncle Vito's cement shoes, and simply turning around to confront baddies behind you can be a Herculean task. The combat is just as equally frustrating, with short-range attacks that practically leave you exchanging blow for blow against foes. The jumping mechanics are horrendous, and the game doesn't even have background music for fuck's sake. But this is why I bought the game.
Goodbye, head!
Oh yeah, it wasn't every day that you got to see decapitation in a video game. The blood is what attracted me to this one, but after several playthroughs, it was pretty evident to me that this game just plain sucked. Blood Red nostalgia goggles can't even save Sword of Sodan. What a stinker.
So those three goofballs known as the Game Beaters rounded up a bunch of their friends to talk about their funniest moments in gaming, and I immediately knew what mine was going to be. It's from the funniest game that I have ever played. Let's check it out. Hey, what up? Nefarious Wes here. And when the Game Beaters were talking about funny moments in games, or moments in games that we found hilarious, one game immediately came to mind. I already knew what scene it was going to be from. It's from South Park: The Stick of Truth. Remember that part where you get shrunken down to miniature size and you have to go through someone's parents' bedroom when they're engaging in a bit of an amorous activity? Of course, you know what I'm talking about.
After being shrunken down to the size of the underpants gnomes, your protagonist comes face to face with the skivvy stealers in your parents' bedroom, naturally while they're engaging in the sweet act of love. Battling gnomes on top of your folks' dresser, Daddy shows Mommy just how much she means to him in the background. It's freaking hilarious. But it's not until you follow the Warlock gnome up onto Mom and Dad's bed where you'll end up pissing yourself. It's so goddamn funny. The Warlock gnome boss battle requires you to maneuver around Mommy's massive memories, all of the while repelling and dishing out attacks. Way too funny. But when a huge pair of balls come swinging your way and you're forced to use Matrix-like evasive maneuvers in the form of a QuickTime event to dodge Daddy's Kiwis, you may never laugh harder at a video game ever again. I know I haven't.
Yeah! Fuck me!
So it shouldn't come as any surprise that I love music, and I really love video game music as well. I mean, good music is good music, right? So Captain Algebra rounded up 4 of his favorite YouTubers to each discuss 2 of their all-time favorite stage tracks on the SNES. So this was a difficult task for me just to narrow down 2 because there are so many great tracks on the SNES, but I managed to do it. Now, I'm a huge shooters fan. That shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. And one of my favorite things about shooters is the soundtrack. A good shooter is always going to have a fantastic soundtrack. Axelay is no exception.
The Super Nintendo isn't exactly known as a powerhouse for shooters, but Konami's Axelay definitely stands out from the rest with its Mode 7 scaling environments, daunting challenge, and the reason that we're here, a killer soundtrack. What a hell of a way to start a game off, as the BGM to Stage 1 begins with a serene intro, before transitioning into a catchy as hell tune, loaded with 16-bit brass instruments and quick tempo percussion. Composed by Taro Kudo, the same guy who had a hand in Castlevania 4's soundtrack, you know you're getting nothing but gold with Axelay's score, and Stage 1 simply epitomizes exactly the type of theme that complements fast-paced shooting action.
So the SNES's library was saturated with role-playing games, so it shouldn't come as a huge shock to see one on this list. One of my all-time favorite soundtracks in a video game ever, Final Fantasy II.
Nobuo Uematsu is a genius, there's no arguing that, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise to see a Final Fantasy game on this list. Final Fantasy II has my all-time favorite soundtrack within the heralded RPG franchise, so picking just one song from the game was as difficult as escaping a battle when the entire party has been turned into toads. But the song that has been getting stuck in my head randomly, time and time again since 1992, is undoubtedly the battle theme, which also happens to be my favorite battle theme in the entire series. That bass line is sweeter than crack, and the catchy melody that accompanies it only gets me pumped to shred monsters into ribbons. A song that I can easily listen to during my free time, Final Fantasy II's battle theme is simply awesome.
So my buddy Mike Tendo wanted to talk about a system that doesn't get a whole lot of love, the Sega Master System, and he rounded up 4 other YouTubers to each discuss one game that they felt was a must-play for the console. You know I love shooters, so I mean this one shouldn't come as any surprise at all.
One of the best known shooters for the Sega Master System is a colorful and vibrant game, and a tough one, Fantasy Zone. It's a ton of fun, but in my opinion, its sequel, Fantasy Zone 2, The Tears of Opa Opa, surpasses the original in almost every way. Released in the States at the end of 1987, our protagonist, the adorable living ship Opa Opa, returns to Fantasy Zone to eradicate the evil Ninon forces, who have since rebounded from the inaugural battle with a new fleet of Adora baddies. Those familiar with the original game are already aware that Fantasy Zone doesn't adhere to the archetypal tropes instilled within the shooter genre back in the 1980s. The horizontal plane in which Opa Opa can maneuver scrolls either to the left or right and loops indefinitely, such as in the arcade classic Defender. Enemy pods must then be destroyed in order to take on the end boss. This being an integral component to Fantasy Zone's gameplay, the mechanic was naturally retained for the sequel, but rather than a single field in which to dispose of pods, Fantasy Zone 2 steps things up a bit, adding warps to send Opa Opa into several other zones within each stage where more enemy pods await. Each level contains at least 3 different sections brimming with pods before concluding with a boss fight. Keeping track of the many warps within each level can be a bit confusing, as it is pretty easy to get lost within Fantasy Zone. Many of the areas within each stage look similar to one another, and missing a single pod, which impedes your ability to tackle the end boss, can be a real pain if you don't know where it is. It's not that bad though. My biggest gripe with the game is the same one that I have with the original: timed special weapons. I can't stand that shit! Special weapons can only be obtained by purchasing them in the many shops littered throughout Fantasy Zone. Money is dropped and then collected when enemies are defeated, giving you much needed coin to upgrade your firepower. The special weapons run on a limited time limit, and once the timer reaches 0, back to the pea shooter for you. Thankfully, there are a few items that stay with you until death, such as speed increases and the auto fire shot, which actually stays with you until game over, even through continues. Yes, continues are sold in shops as well. Just remember to press the button to pick up from where you left off before the title screen returns. Man, how many times did I have to start over because I forgot? Unlike the original though, the shops are always located in the same place and can be entered as needed. There are even hidden shops that are uncovered when Opa shoots in just the right spot. Invaluable items can be found in these, including the red bottle upgrade, which doubles Opa Opa's hit meter. Yeah, you actually have a life bar in this one. Pretty nifty. The price of weapons and items increase with subsequent purchases, so money and item management play a role in this one. Without special weapons and speed power-ups, Fantasy Zone 2 can get pretty challenging, especially in the later levels. They're damn near impossible without power-ups. The game as a whole can be pretty difficult, minus the bosses, who I found to be absolute pushovers. The visuals are even more vibrant than the original, but sadly, the soundtrack isn't nearly as good as its predecessors. The tunes aren't bad, but they're definitely nothing I find myself humming to long after the game has been shut off, but not a game breaker by any means. If you're a fan of shooters, especially cute 'em ups, then this game is hands down a must-play. It's so much fun and unique compared to its contemporaries at the time that I feel non-shooter fans would really enjoy Fantasy Zone 2 as well. Give it a shot.
So those were some of my favorite collaborations that I have contributed to. I'm going to leave a link for each of the videos down in the description below so you can check them out for yourself, because there are some other great YouTubers that shared some great games, and I think you really ought to give them a look and check out these other channels for their regular content as well. So I want to thank everyone who has ever asked me to be in a collaboration, and anyone that has ever been in one of my collaborations. They're a lot of fun. It's really cool to bring a bunch of different ideas together. I really dig it. So it's pretty awesome for the YouTube community. So make sure to check the other channels out. And until next time, until Volume 3, whenever that comes around, I'll catch you guys later.